I would like to introduce Kathy Parks, and she is the coordinator of CASA, which was a court-appointed special advocate for children in foster care. But she's going to talk about some legislation involved with CASA and a little more about the organization. So, here you go.
First of all, thank you everyone for, can you hear me back there? Okay. Thank you everyone for taking the time out and coming out today, and for your role that you play in the community and making a difference. And I'm going to tell you in a few minutes exactly the power that you all have that you may not know how powerful it is. So first of all, how many of you are familiar with court-appointed special advocates for abused and neglected children? Okay, good. The hard part in our areas, we have a lot of different programs. We have CAPS, which is Child Advocacy Program that we get confused with. They also work with abused and neglected children in the area. They're the first step before CASA comes involved. We have the other CASA program, which is Community Alternative Aging System, which works with our elderly and people that are in care. And then we have, of course, COI with Roberta, which is Chautauqua Opportunities. So there's a lot of acronyms. So when it comes to CASA, sometimes people get confused. So as what you'll hear us saying now, moving forward, is court-appointed special advocates. And as what our role is back in 2003, our judge was at a conference, and she heard other judges talking about how they had everyday citizens, like all of you sitting here in the room, that went through a training to help assist when a child went into care, give their voice, give her that second set of eyes when she had to rule in a courtroom on the well-being of a child. So it was hard from her at the bench, would only be given certain reports from caseworkers, judges, you know, that she wanted that second set of eyes. And all these other judges were talking about how they just started this program. So Judge Claire, for those of you who are familiar with her, when the judge sort of gets something in her mind, she sets forth until she accomplishes it. So in 2004, they swore in their first set of volunteers. They had 4 people that went through the 30-hour training. I'm happy to say that Mary here just completed our training and is a new advocate volunteer working with, you have 2 kids or 3?
3.
3, okay. So anyhow, so that's how we started. So then I came on in 2006 as an advocate supervisor coordinator, and from there I've turned over and come into being the program manager for the past few years. What our role is we take everyday citizens, we go through a 30-hour training. It's quite detailed. We go over some law, we go over case studies, child welfare, child well-being, all sorts of things, how to write court reports. It's quite a training. I would think that we had a lot of fun. We try to make it as fun as possible, being the subject that it is. And then after that, they're sworn in by the judge, in which then they take an oath stating that they will be a voice for that child, they will keep it confidential, and they will be there for that child and report. So that is, in a nutshell, of what our CASA volunteers sign up to do when they're doing it. Through the years, where you guys play a role, legislation, we're a non-for-profit, so we're totally funded by grants, every day people giving donations, and just fundraising. So as you know, in a small community, you're all hit up a lot when it comes to like fundraisings or donations and stuff like that. So we really rely on some of the grants. Well, getting into the federal grants was a little tough, and Roberta, she's a pro at that. She's done very well at COI, getting different grants and manipulating them around as far as how to get them and everything. But with CASA, we had legislation that back the same day as the Sandy Hook shooting, we got word that they had taken out all of our CASA funding. So here we're like, okay, our programs are gonna close. I mean, it's not a huge portion of money, but some of our organizations relied on a lot more of that money than some of us small organizations. So a lot of us were like, oh my gosh, you know, what do we do with these kids we're serving? How do we tell our volunteers? You know, it was devastating enough that all these innocent lives were taken that day. And just that whole day was like a horrific nightmare for all of us. So after we all got over the shock and the numbness and everything, we were told, well, you know what, it's important to contact your League of Women Voters, your congressmen, your senators. You need to rally everybody together, get in the newspapers, figure out how to make them aware of the importance of what the programs do in the area. So they did. They put in a phone call. Everyone joined on board, and it got to a point, a week and a half later, we had legislators calling saying, call them off. There were, yeah, it was amazing, and we were all, yeah, so hats off. I mean, when I talk about a group of people being able to save a cause, I mean, you definitely, your hearts and your purpose means so much to this community. So we were all like, oh my gosh, is this for real? But they were just like, okay, we'll talk to you, we're gonna relook at the budget. So they put the money back in, and now after that, we thought, well, we better not stop there. We better try to, get some bills that are in there to sort of protect, making sure that the children are being protected in our area. So through that, through legislation and different bills, and if you go to our website, there's a link where you can go and you can see the different bills that are in the House right now, being ready to be passed. We've made it to the Senate. Now we need to go to the Assembly. So if you want to click onto our web page, which I gave information on different cards and it has that, you'll be able to link to that and see exactly the different bills. Actually, in March, we're lobbying out in Albany and meeting with people just to make sure that they're still aware of the need for it and what we do and the importance and how our supporters in the area are for it. So we're continuing to move forward with that, and like I said, your role and what you did literally helped save this organization. So the reason we're here 2 years later is because of all of you in this room who care enough about your community to stand up and do what you need to do. So I can't thank you enough for that, and the children that we serve can't thank you enough for that. So, is there any other questions or, that you have? Yes?
How many children in Chautauqua County do you service?
Okay, right now we have, after our last group, we have a total of, 25 active volunteers, and we're serving 58 kids. There is still a waiting list. We have, right now, just crunching numbers for grants the other day, we have a total of 58 kids that are on a waiting list that could use a CASA volunteer. Right now, because of finances, we're sort of constrained right now. We can only have, myself can only supervise 30 volunteers, and we're at max now with our volunteers. So right now, until we're able to find funding to grow the program, to add another CASA advocate, we're at a standstill of the volunteer or the kids that we can serve right now. So in our strategic plan in the next year, we're hoping to be able to, get more funding, stabilize ourselves and add that extra person to be able to serve the rest of the children that are in need. Yes?
How are the children? Are the children referred to you? Do you?
Yes.
I'm confused. I'd like to know how you become acquainted with the children that need this
Okay.
service.
Is how it works is when a case comes through the courts and the judge rules that it's neglected, is what she does is after that court, the files go up, and when she's sitting on the bench, or he, because now we have 2 family court judges, they'll look at it and they'll, this is perfect for CASA. They look at the fact that, like, if there is a family member that is stepping up, or it looks like mom and dad just maybe, fell off a little bit of, the track, or maybe it's not so detrimental and the kids will be returned to a safe environment, then they're not so much worried about it. But they take the higher priority cases, and especially the kids that enter foster care, to have that extra set of eyes. So that is what the judge will do, is she'll send down those referrals, and I got to get used to 2 judges, I apologize, Judge Piazza, who's amazing. But anyhow, is what we will do is we'll get those referrals, and they will prioritize them, high, medium, or low. And then is what we do is we add it to our list, and when a volunteer is in the right end of the county, or the child's age matches, there's a lot of matching with the volunteer. Some volunteers might not be comfortable with a teenager. They may only want younger kids. They may not want to work with a child that's been sexually abused because it makes them feel uncomfortable. So that's fine. So we just match up the best we can. So we take that list from the judge of referrals and we match them up as best as possible. And we keep that referral and we keep tracking them until they end up, you know, either they close, a lot of them are still, you know, ongoing for, you know, at least a year or two. They're still, you know, in the system. Legislation tries to have the kids that have permanency anywhere from the 18 to 22 months after they've been taken into care. So there is legislation to try to really watch for the kids.
How many
So-
children in the county are in foster care?
In foster care, I want to say there was 163 in 2015, I think the numbers were. So, and I mean, I'm pretty sure that was the number that we last saw in the last report we just got. So, I know as far as the cases coming through the courts, there was 460 that came through the courts under a neglect or an abuse petition. So, yes.
Forgive me for my ignorance, but this is the first I've really heard from you and your organization, and I'm just curious, you know, I'm putting the pieces together best I can, but I don't want to make misassumptions. So it sounds to me as though your program is directed at children primarily, if not exclusively, and troubled children, children with difficulty. And this ties right in with some of you around my vintage. Remember back in Lyndon Baines Johnson, the Great Society program, where we had neglected lower income and less fortunate families and children for generations, and finally trying to turn the corner where we put money in to provide better programs. So this continues on from that whole legacy, and I think there was once a saying that, you know, give them a hand up, not a handout. And again, what I'm hearing you say is that rather than just simply make their life more bearable, more endurable, for the short run, you're trying to help these kids acquire skills and understanding to better their chances to break out of that cycle of poverty that they live in. Is that correct?
You said it beautifully. You want to come up here and help me out? You're amazing. No, and actually, exactly, and that is the mission. And the nice thing is a volunteer, where a caseworker might have anywhere from 8 to 12 cases, a volunteer handles one case. So that may be anywhere from 1 child to 4 children. So they are able to focus on the needs of the child at a more direct base. We track their education, we track their medical. We just had a volunteer call me the other day. The child was in his 4th placement. The child had all these needs. He wasn't on the right medication. They ended up, you know, removing him from home to home. Well, come to find out, this poor child had an IEP that hasn't been followed now for 2 years, and she couldn't even find the IEP.
An IEP is an individual education
Plan, sorry about
And
that, yeah,
it's involved with the students.
for children, so, yes.
Just comments, about the support of this program. I was a CPS worker for about 20 years in
Bless your
Arizona.
heart.
And an investigated the whole bit. And we started the CASA, Royal We, Arizona, started the CASA program in the 90s. And so I was amazed that New York,
Excellent.
that I've always held up as, you know, whiz kids for, you know, liberal stuff. It didn't get started until 2004.
Yeah.
But let me back up. As an investigator who needed that CASA to really impress upon the court their needs, somebody totally, not a lawyer, you know, you've got 4 lawyers, you know, standing up for each case, and somebody who was directed just towards the child was absolutely wonderful.
Thank
And
you.
made all the difference for that kid in the world.
Yeah, it does.
And I can't sing the praises
Well, and
loud
I
enough.
sing for you too, because your job was absolutely, and that is the other thing with CASA. The attorneys have to, I think it was 2000, almost 6 years ago, the laws changed where the attorney could no longer, they have to represent the child's wishes instead of their best interest. So that's when the attorneys were looking at us saying, oh my gosh, we all know what this child wants. They want to go back with mom, live the streets, do whatever they need. we know that's not in the child's best interest, but if they have to advocate and, you know, legally, their role is whatever the child wants. So we were able to work with the attorneys, and even though we knew that that wasn't the right route, CASA is able to do for the best interest of the child. So that was able to sort of like, you know, play out. And we're very fortunate in Chautauqua County to have the Department of Social Services that we do. Our caseworkers and CPS workers are amazing. I mean, they are more than willing to work together with us as a team instead of like, this is my job, this is their job. They work together as a team, and as a team together, we're gonna accomplish a lot more. It's like it was a caseworker who wasn't able to get to a meeting at the school, you know, to discuss an IEP or a 504 plan. So the CASA volunteer is able to go in there and make sure that that child is represented. And we also are there to support our amazing foster families that are in the area that go through so much as well. So we consider us as part of the team to make the difference in these kids' lives. And as Roberta also, COI, they've reached out to these families and these kids for years and have done amazing things as well. That's what instilled the love of these poor, underprivileged kids and families. As I actually worked at Head Start years ago, and the children that we served, they just resonated in me, and which led me to wanting to do more and working for, you know, the kids that are sort of the underdog that needs that voice. Yes.
I bring a question from a former student out of state who
Okay.
asked me, and I couldn't answer, maybe you can, with regard either nationally or in New York, in the foster care system, when the kids age out at 18, I
Can you
believe.
speak a little louder?
Yes, what do they do with the kids who age out at, say, 18 from foster care? Do they get pushed off the cliff? Do they get dropped on their heads? Is there any sort of a, I don't know the word. Any help with that?
Do you want
for
to have
18
your
who probably hasn't
Well, you
had
can
the
join us.
calmest life?
The nice thing is with the kids that are involved with CASA, their volunteers are there, so we've done independent living with the caseworkers. We've tried to establish them. We have a life books project, so when these kids are aging out, they have their working papers, they have their social security card, they have memories, they have past, they have a resume. So with the kids that we work with, and like I said, we're a small organization, so we only work with a handful. But there are other initiatives into the independent living for the children. COI has an amazing program to, you know, work with the youth. Unfortunately, we can't get them all, and for that child, it's really, it's heartbreaking when they have to venture out without that one person. We have a lot of our kids that have aged out, and I have a little girl that aged out, and she'll still call me. She's been out 3 years now, and she'll still call once in a while, and she's working a job. She struggled at school. We got her through school. She graduated. She tripped going across stage, but we both laughed because she was not the most graceful thing, but she made it across that stage. We laughed about it, but she's working at a dollar store. But you know what? She's proud that she's one step above, and she feels she's making her mom proud by doing this too, because she did reconnect. As soon as she turned 18, she went and she searched for her mother. So, like we knew she would, but there's that, you know, it's heartbreaking, but it's very. But Roberta, do you want to talk about?
We have a transitional, Chautauqua Opportunities has a transitional independent living program for youth 18 to 22, 23. And it's an 18-month program. They stay with us and they learn financial skills, independent living skills, and they have to be working and or in school. And we encourage them building a life plan and future, and connect them oftentimes with other youth who are disconnected from their families because it's beneficial for them to stay disconnected. We form another community around them so that, because it's heartbreaking to see youth who have been disconnected from their family and it's Christmas and they have nowhere to go. So we create, because it is a living facility, so we create holidays with them with a sense of family. We rebuild family that they stay connected with even when they transition to independence. They come back and they mentor other kids in the program, even if they're in college and successfully transitioned out. We have a very, very successful outcomes with these young people, and they are very much giving back to young people that keep coming in. And Chautauqua County is very fortunate to have this program. It's very rare for a rural, small county to have a transitional independent living program and a runaway homeless youth shelter, and we have both.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to add one thing. I have been a mandated reporter for decades, and when they first brought about the program for, when they first had the program for identifying neglect and abuse, I was one of the trainers decades ago. And we just recently had an extra, conference or whatever, and lo and behold, there were things that I'm going, I thought I knew it all, but I was just amazed at what, we got a perspective from the police, which we'd never really, I'd never gotten that perspective with the detective that interviews kids. And, what the mandated reporter should say and not say or, do. I was just, it's like, it's been a great program. I mean, I've gleaned things that I never knew and been involved for a long time.
Yes.
Ironically, so many of these adversely affected children almost have to, by necessity, abandon their own family. But we need a support system. We need people to help us, and if there's a network available that's readily connectable for them, that has to substantially better the chances of success in the overall program of these human lives that are searching for a path of survival in their own existence. And so I guess if I could hear a little more about that, because I'm really interested about this alternative support system that you make available for kids that have to kind of abandon their own family for their own survival.
But as far as like the courts, they've realized now kids aging out of the system, they actually bring a mediation in together with all the players. And as what we do is we sit down with the caseworkers, the attorneys, everybody involved with that kid, and we map out with the Department of Social Services, they're the lead agents on that, but we map out, okay, if you were to become homeless tomorrow, who would you contact? If you needed to find your social security number, where would you go? So we're really trying our best between COI, between the Department of Social Services, and between the courts and our agency helping, assisting and making sure that as many children have these resources as possible when they, age out of the system.
Kathy has to actually get the course.
Yes, I do. Yes.
But I
thank
really
you.
appreciate your coming and talking.
And I did share with you, our big fundraiser has come to the table. Anyone that has a business or anything or wants to come for a very fun event, that is our main fundraiser, so please share out in the community. We would greatly appreciate it.
When is it?
It is April 21st.
Yeah,
I put some cards on your tables. So thank you for doing what you do.
Now, I'd like to introduce Roberta Keller. She is the Executive Director of Chautauqua Opportunities. That is a CAP agency. It's a community action program. And I don't know if all of you are familiar. It's a national, nationwide program that's been around forever. It was my first job out of college. One thing before I introduce her, I just wanted to point out the things on the statistics on poverty. I don't know about you, but I'm appalled by these statistics. 19.8%, that's almost 20% of people in our county. And when we talk about poverty, this is federal poverty, $23,000 for a family of 4. I know my husband and I, we make more than that, but we can barely make it. If you look down here at the gender, if you have any questions about that this is still very much a woman's issue, look at the gender and poverty of the median income between males and females in our county. 32,000 compared to 19,000. And this one should really appall all of us. The number of children that are in poverty, and 49.1% of the female heads of households, almost 50% are living in poverty. With that in mind, it is great pleasure that I get to introduce Roberta Keller. When you asked for about the Hands Up, this is the agency that does it. They empower people to get out of poverty. And with Roberta has just innovative, wonderful methods of helping people, not only in their immediate needs, but really how to escape poverty. So, Roberta.
Hi, I've given you a handout. I just want to kind of give you some information on this so it's more meaningful to you. This is put out every year by it's called CFED, which is the Corporation for Enterprise Development. They rate states nationally by policy and by statistical information regarding poverty and asset wealth. New York, as you can see, as a state, in the 5 asset areas that are rated, which is income, business and jobs, housing and homeownership, healthcare, and education. Those are the 5 asset areas that every state in the country is rated in, and New York scores 32 out of 50. The great New York. Not so great. We do well in New York in some areas with policy and still do poorly in our statistics. So our policies may not be as effective as they should be, and at this point the governor is implementing a task force across the state to look at why and to try and come up with some innovative strategies around poverty. But in income, New York rates C, in business and jobs, a B, in housing and homeownership, an F. Now, traditionally, New York has always rated a D in housing and homeownership, and that is because of New York City. So we have very good homeownership policies in New York State, but as long as New York City is factored in to the state averages, we're not going to show a good rating because the preponderance of individuals in New York City do not own their home, and nor are they ever going to. Healthcare, a B, and education, a C. And the reason we went from a D to an F in homeownership is since 2008 with the housing collapse, what you have seen is that the federal home loan, the federal banks, and the larger banks are not promoting homeownership, and they are not trying to stimulate homeownership like they did in the mid-2000s, which at that time, those policies weren't very well thought out, which led us to 2008 and the housing issues that occurred across the country. So I thought you'd be interested in this, because our main look and what we want to raise the awareness is traditionally we talk about income poverty. But since 2008, there's a growing awareness of the real critical nature of asset poverty. In 2008, what happened to so many middle-class Americans is that they discovered the implication of being asset poor. If you lose your job, which has been happening at an alarming rate to many people who have been employed all of their lives and have lived the middle class life, if you lose your job and you have not any assets to speak of and you don't have any liquid asset wealth, then you are vulnerable to falling into poverty quickly. And many, many people fell into poverty. Seniors and many people who had accrued debt, whether it was because they were in maybe their 40s and 50s and they had children in college and they had mortgaged their homes and they had done extensive borrowing in order to put their children through college, then lost jobs, and they would not find jobs that would pay the same level when they were reemployed, but they found that a typical time for unemployment was on average 6 months, so they didn't have enough liquid assets to sustain their lifestyle for 6 months. this is what they measure asset poverty is if you were to lose your income today, do you have enough liquid assets to sustain your current lifestyle for 3 months? And if you look here in New York State, 33% of New Yorkers in the state do not have that. And in Chautauqua County, we're over 60%. And 15% of New Yorkers are living in income poverty, 23 to 24% of Chautauqua County is living in poverty. And on average, 1 in 4 of our children are living in poverty. And as Judy said, that poverty formula was formulated back in the 60s. It has not been refined. It doesn't take any consideration into debt, is not factored into that at all. So it's really a very surreal, not thorough calculation. People are far worse off than that number portrays. So enough about the demographics, unless I'll answer it later, if that's okay with you. But I wanted to give you an overview of what's happening in anti-poverty work. We are a community action agency. There are 1,100 community action agencies across the country. They were created as part of President Johnson's War on Poverty. We were created out of the Economic Opportunity Act in 1964. The intent was to take federal anti-poverty money and leverage local and state support to address the issues of poverty in locales across the country. Because the issues that are causing poverty in New York are very different than what's happening in Wyoming and in Hawaii and in Alaska. And so you can't create one blanket strategy in Washington that's going to actually address specifically what's happening region to region across the country. So the concept of community action was a great concept. It brings partnerships. It's designed to partner, and it's designed to break down the barriers economically for people who are living in poverty or people who are vulnerable to fall into poverty. So our mission is to serve people living in poverty, to prevent people from falling into poverty, to create economic opportunities for people to get out of poverty, and to stabilize the overall economy so that the bottom rises, and we look together as a community for those solutions. So if Chautauqua Opportunities is creating those solutions by themselves, we're failing. If we engage all the sectors of the community in fighting poverty, we're successful. So our mission is to break down the barriers and to create a greater awareness of poverty and what causes poverty and what it's like to live in poverty, and to take away the myth that everybody is living off of everybody else, that a few of us are sustaining so many of us. In reality, in Chautauqua County, most of the poor people in Chautauqua County are actually working. We are working poor traditionally in our county, and always have been. So you ultimately have to get down to other realities about wages. There are so many things that I could talk to you about for so many hours about poverty, but I'm not going to do that. So what's happening in Washington now that's different around the anti-poverty movement than happened in 1960s? In 1960s, it was about giving people a fish if they were hungry. So you had cheese trucks. They gave out cheese, they gave out surplus food, okay. In 1970s and early 80s, it was about teaching people to fish. In 1990s, early 1990s, it was, well, pardon me, hell, if you give them a fishing pole and there's nothing in the pond, what good's he gonna do? So then it was about teaching people to fish, but stocking the pond. So there's fish in the pond so they can get something. So with that in mind, what's happening now and where are they going is the overall sentiment is we want to see people get out of poverty. Since 1964, since President Johnson's War on Poverty, we haven't seen great outcomes. We haven't seen tremendous numbers of people getting out of poverty. So the services that were created to help the poor in the 1960s, which have not been redesigned since then, have not worked to help people get out of poverty. And so what people are saying now in Washington is, so what do we have to do to get people out of poverty? We want to see outcomes. Washington realized that government has created silos. Government has provided health services over there, and housing services over there, and children's services over there, and adult services over there, and youth services over there, and none of them talk to each other. But all of them deal with one family that has all of those issues, but there's no coordination. And the design of each of those services are often counterproductive. So they actually design their services, they implement their services, they fund their services totally blindly about what this one's doing. So they're working at odds many times, not together. So Washington is saying we need to break down the silos. So those are the new, and the other major shift federally is we want to see communities working in coordination. We want to see systems of care. We want the community to do what we've never done. We want the community to work together. We want the police, we want mental health, we want the health department, we want the Department of Social Services, we want the community-based organizations, we want the schools and the hospitals and the doctors all talking together so that what we're all trying to do is coordinated and everybody's aware of what's happening, so we're working collectively in one large, seamless manner to move people toward better outcomes. More and more of that is happening across the country. Because if you can't demonstrate the beginnings of that, you cannot get federal funding anymore. Chautauqua County's been very successful at this. We have our county mental health department has what's called the Tapestry Award, which is a very large grant for 5 years that because they are coordinating their mental health into a system of care. Chautauqua Opportunities has been very, very successful in leveraging a number of very large federal grants around coordination. Chautauqua Opportunities has been serving Chautauqua County since 1965. We're now serving Chautauqua County and 13 other counties in New York State and 12 counties in Pennsylvania and Ashtabula, Ohio. So we are expanding and we are moving regionally in our service model. And this is because our service model at this point is the only service model in the country that has implemented everything that the federal government is now looking for. And we did it 18 years ago. Thank you. I really am proud of this. 18 years ago, Chautauqua Opportunities began a total transformation of our organization. We became outcome focused. We integrated all of our services. We have a health services division, a housing division, health, housing, child care council, which is the child care resource and referral service, early childhood, youth, family services, economic development, and community development. All of those services are integrated. What that means is when a customer comes to Chautauqua Opportunities, they go through one point of intake. An electronic file is created. All of our staff work on one system that has been customized, one data system that has been customized and is integrated across all of our services. At the point of intake, an electronic file is created, eligibility is taken. We have a continuum of care that shows an individual's life from crisis to vulnerable to stable to safe to thriving. At crisis, you're in trouble. At vulnerable, you're in trouble. Stable, you've reached self-sufficiency. Stable has a range. You're approaching self-sufficiency, you've reached self-sufficiency. Safe, stable, and thriving. Thriving is economic security. All of us should be working toward economic security. We have these continuums for every life modality. So when you come into intake, you are assessed. We have an assessment tool, and you are risk assessed in all of your basic life areas. You may be thriving in health, but you may be in crisis in housing. So you may be homeless or about to be homeless, but you're healthy and you have health insurance and you're employed. Such a thing could happen, okay? So you're risk assessed across all of your life areas. And at that point in time, all services that we have that you are eligible for come out in a printout. You look at, the individual looks at the continuum and starts to begin a process. You do a self-assessment right there. You fill out a self-assessment which shows us your readiness for change, which is very important. Because in order to do anything, it's all about people's willingness to change. People have to first understand, where am I? How did I get here? And what role did I play in being here? And what role do I play in getting out of here? And do I want to get out of here? Because ultimately, it's a customer-driven model. We believe every man and every woman, it's their life. And people need to make choices. They need information, they need to be well informed about the consequences of their choices. And people need to experience the consequences of their choices. Sometimes we're not able to allow that, but we try to encourage people to experience the consequences of their choices. Because it's consequences that ultimately make us all grow and make better decisions. And so it's all about more and more changing decisions. I say we are not Chautauqua Opportunity, we are Chautauqua Opportunities. Nobody ever has chosen a straight path toward progress. Everybody has diversions, everybody makes errors, everybody makes poor choices at some point in their life, goes back, makes another choice and redefines, and there's a little bump in the road. So we allow for that, we expect that. It's people's choice in their life. If people choose to live under a bridge, I am a firm believer they should. But they should choose to live under a bridge. And they should understand that it is their choice. And if they don't want to live under a bridge, they shouldn't have to live under a bridge. After they are assessed, they work with the navigator to create the beginning of a life plan. Every time they go to a service, all of our services are used as tools to help an individual attain short and long-term goals. Those goals are ultimately aimed at moving you toward economic security. And it's about gaining a better understanding of personal responsibility and accountability. It's about having opportunities. We provide life coaches, and they are life coaches because our role is to help people to understand how to make changes, to understand and to prepare people for major life changes, and to create community, because community and support is critical for all people, and especially people who are in any kind of stress. So anytime in our lives when we've experienced any stress, we lean on those people we love and those people who love us. We lean on our community, and they help us through those difficult times. But people who live in poverty have a very, very low community. So they are often very isolated. So part of our job is to build a community around our customers and to help them to form a sense of community. So that's pretty much what we do and how we do it and why we do it. We're very heavily federally funded and state. But at this point, New York State puts very little money out except the money they have to match to get federal money. So most of the money, even though the contract may be between Chautauqua Opportunities and New York State, its origin is federal. So most of our money's origin is federal. New York State may be the contractor on behalf of the federal government, but they're overseen by the federal government because the origin of the money is federal. But we do have contracts locally, contracts with the state, federal. We have contracts with utility companies. We have contracts with a lot of entities. We get money from federal home loan banks. We get money from banks. We are a CDFI, which is a community development financial institution. So we do business lending. As a matter of fact, we did a loan to start this business. We do lending, business startup, business expansion, personal lending, credit counseling, debt restructuring. We are the only agency doing what we're doing in the country. We are highlighted by the Department of Health and Human Services. They know about us everywhere in Washington, in every department. They talk about us. I just got a call yesterday from a director in Massachusetts who wants to come and visit and see our model and learn how to do it. Washington is now promoting the core elements of our model. So other agencies want to see it.
Somebody should report you to 60 Minutes. I swear to God, you're a real value for the taxpayers' dollars if you're actually accomplishing your objectives.
Thank you very much. I just want you to know about our staff. I'm sorry, Minda, I'll just be a minute. But other agencies that are doing or trying to implement what we did are being paid by foundations to do parts of it. Nobody paid us to do this. We did this by ourselves while we worked and fought government to do it because they didn't like it. Because at the time that we did it, it went against everything government wanted. I went to Albany repeatedly to tell them what I was going to do. We lost the WIC program because the WIC program would not let us centralize intake, and I would not capitulate. So it was a long fight, but our staff did this working double time without any special staff. So we didn't hire consultants. We didn't pay anybody to come in and do this work. We did it ourselves. We're an evidence-based, certified evidence-based agency by the University of Buffalo. Our data has been certified as evidence-based. We actually get people out of poverty. We have anti-poverty strategies and we have wealth creation strategies. We are growing our anti-poverty services and our wealth creation services at the same time. So while we're moving people out of poverty, the only way to get out of poverty is to generate wealth. So they have to have a plan at the beginning that takes them to where they want to go. And it's the vision and the coaching and the motivation that gets them through those hurdles and keeps them moving. It's a beautiful thing to watch people grow and change their lives. It is a really motivating thing to work with people and see the changes in people's lives.
As you know, the League is an advocacy organization. What laws, where should we be advocating for continuation of an expansion of services such as yours? Albany, Washington, what bills, what should we be doing?
Traditionally, okay, it's difficult to get a Democrat to sit down and talk about these things. You would be surprised to hear that, because traditionally Democrats want to say, oh, we support the poor. We just keep throwing more money at them. We don't know what's working. We don't sit down to spend the time to analyze what's working. We just keep writing the check. So traditionally, it's been difficult to get Democratic politicians to listen. So it's a very weird, very strange. But
I am an old woman. And when I was a young girl, I was in the civil rights movement, and I was strong. I was from the hippies, okay? I was back in those days. Judy, you remember me, right? Long ago, right? So, and yet, my strongest political allies in my old age are Tea Party Republicans. Go figure.
Wow.
How did that happen? Okay, how come the Tea Party people have looked at our model and said, holy smokes, this is what we want?
It works.
Because it isn't that they're not willing to write the check. They're tired of writing the same check and watching more people become poor. So they're willing to write the check if the check pays for something that's going to make a difference. And they want to refine the system. Now, the Democrats are afraid because they don't trust the Tea Party people, and I totally understand the politics of that, because I am not a Tea Party person, okay? But, I mean, I understand that fundamentally. But we have so much to do, and we are so far from getting anything done, that we've never hit a wall yet between my political beliefs and the Tea Party political beliefs, because we're still in areas we agree on. So like I look at me and Andy Goodell, for example, okay? When Andy Goodell was county executive, I worked with him. And we worked really well. We got a lot of things done together back in those days in the 90s. And he and I believe the same about a lot of things. Well, we came to our end. Okay, we did a lot, and then we banged into each other, and we found out where we don't agree. But that's a good thing. That means we made a lot of progress before he said, no way. Okay, so I think what can you do? It's very important that all politicians realize the programs of the 60s are not meeting the needs of the current decade or the future. And this country has failed the American workforce miserably. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, this country should have been working in middle schools, preparing them for nanotechnology and biomedicine, and they should have been understanding what is America's niche market in a global economy. And they should have been preparing our children to go into the future in the markets that we actually have a chance at. It doesn't matter that we lost manufacturing and that manufacturing could return tomorrow. It will not bring back the assembly line. It will return with automation and robots. So who's going to program the robotics? Who's going to build the robots? Who's going to do that? That's the future that's America's. And why haven't we prepared that workforce globally? And we haven't done that. So now what do we do? What do we do with all of these displaced workers who are not prepared to work in the industry that is ours, that is uniquely ours in a global economy? Our market is not sewing clothes, okay? We're not going to be the sewers anymore, and we're not going to be putting lids on jars anymore. That's not our market in the world. And if we have to accept that, those jobs are not coming back to us. So what do we do with all of the Americans who don't have the training? I would recommend we advocate for the reinstitution of the Civilian Conservation Corps, and we use that Civilian Conservation Corps to retool America, high-speed rail, alternative energy sources, that we rebuild our country technologically, and we use that time to retrain the displaced workers in the skills that they need to be viable in the global economy, and at the same time transform America into the 23rd century. Those are things we need to do. That's valuable work, and that would be valuable investment. We are a very we force people to protect the little because they don't want to lose it, instead of incentivizing people to become innovative and entrepreneurial and gain more. So as a country, if you have 25% of your population in poverty, that's 1 in 4 of us are living in poverty. We need to find a way to turn around our approach so that we're not protecting a minimal, but we're all seeking more. And we need to reward innovation and hard work, and we need to allow people, instead of being eligible for services, you have to divest yourself of all your assets and become poorer in order to get $1 from me. I would like to give you $2, keep what you have, and let's plan for the future and build for the future and use your assets. Use it as a strength and build on it so you don't need my money anymore. But I make you poorer and then I have to sustain you there. And there's no way out. I don't know if I answered your question, but there are so many things you can advocate for. All of the services are critical. They're all critical. If you could see what people are dealing with, we need lead. We have to deal with lead. What's happening in Flint is happening, except for the fact that they're systemically poisoning their children. Other than that, there are lead issues all over America. Our children in this county are suffering from lead. And even if you test them, there's no funding to remediate them. So that's why they stopped testing. The federal government put money out. We used to have lead testing programs, and we were funded to test, and then they stopped because they were so shocked by how many people had lead. And if they found out you had lead in your house and they didn't do something about it and your children were poisoned, they had a little liability. So their lawyers said, enough funding lead, leave it alone because you're liable to know and not to do. So if you don't know, you can claim ignorance. So we don't test anymore because if we did, we'd have to do. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens in Flint, but we have a Democratic president who isn't doing anything about Flint. He's giving him money, but they're not spending it, and they're not doing anything, and we're systemically poisoning children in Flint. We're all sitting here while they're poisoning children.